welcome to a new episode of Worlds Collide. This is the podcast where I talk to people about their experiences abroad. And I am your host, Viktoria. Before we start, I wanted to make sure that you follow this podcast on your podcast app. So push the button in the corner of your app so you will never miss an episode. And if you also want to help me out a little bit and like this podcast, then you could give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app, or maybe even, if this is not too much to ask for, write a sentence or two on Apple Podcast. And yeah, that would be great. So thank you so much for that. That was that. So now it's the time for this week's interview. Here it is. Okay, my guest today is Mary Martha. Hi, Mary Martha. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Yes, for sure. So tell me, where are you?
I am in Santiago, Chile, so I'm in South America.
Okay, and why? What
Yeah,
brought you there?
yeah, that's a great question. I want to get asked a lot. So I've been here for actually 8 years. I moved to Chile when I was 24. After I
Huh?
graduated college, I really wanted to learn Spanish and live abroad. So I was really open to going wherever they spoke Spanish. And I
Okay.
have a family friend who had lived in Chile. So
Mm-hmm.
when she was coming back to the US and I was graduating, we met up to talk about Chile. And what she had to say about Chile sounded really great. And out of all of the Spanish speaking countries, I was like, I'm just going to go to one country where at least I know one person, which was her boyfriend
Yeah.
at the time. Yeah. So it's kind of a logical decision and just see what happens. And yeah, I've been here ever since.
And did you decide on, hey, I'm just gonna go for a year or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I got certified to teach English as a second language, which
Mm.
is really common. A lot of people do. And yeah, I told myself no matter what, if it was really hard, I was going to stay for 6 months. If I hated it 6 months, I could go back home, hopefully a year. And I had this whole thing of I'm going to become bilingual in a year and all of these things that I realized
Yeah.
took a lot longer to actually
Uh-huh.
happen. So yeah, so the year turned into more, but yeah, my goal was just a year kind of in the beginning.
So what made you then extend your year?
So I think at the time, around 12 months, it was really tough for me in the first year to just learn a new culture, learn a language, figure out friends, community, career stuff. So I think the first 12 months felt so hard. So when I
Mm-hmm.
got to that year mark, I felt like I was starting to notice a shift and it was starting to get easier. So it just kind of felt like, why would I move back home? And as you know, living in the US, it's so big. So it'd be like maybe moving somewhere new again and go through a whole new process when I'm just starting to kind of feel like I'm finding my way. And then at year two, I met my now husband who's Chilean.
Uh,
So that kind of changed for the first 2 years. It was honestly just, I think it took a long time to get settled.
okay. Do you remember, like in the beginning when you got there? So you haven't been there. So what were your expectations like? And and how was it then actually when you got there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I had a great advantage because I had the friend who had lived here and she's from my same hometown. And she
Mm-hmm.
gave me this advice to just not Google it too much, to not look in, kind of just to go with a really open mind. And because
Mm-hmm.
I knew her and I trusted her, and I also think I was a lot younger, I just was like, what? I didn't really have any, I wasn't that anxious or worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really just went in with an open mind, not really expecting, not really like giving it too much thought, apart from obviously the logistical things and just kind of getting settled. So I think like my first expectations, like to answer your question, were kind of like, whoa, kind of like just taking it all in, a little bit overwhelmed. In Chile, they speak a very different type of Spanish. They speak in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their own slang
Mm-hmm.
compared to like actual Spanish.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit like, whoa, like I don't even recognize some Spanish words.
Okay, so you don't understand, uh-huh.
Yeah, so I think it kind of all came like a big wave of like shock, but it was exciting and like probably equally exciting and scary at the same time.
Okay, and when you moved to Santiago, was it
Hmm.
Santiago in the beginning too?
Yes, it's always been Santiago, yeah.
And where did you move from? So was it also, my question is, um, the size of the place, was it like a big difference?
Definitely, yeah. I moved from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is like the city in actual people who live in the city, I think is like 600,000. And in Santiago, it's like 7 million, maybe a
Oh,
little bit more than
wow.
that.
So
So
10 times bigger, uh-huh.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And in Milwaukee, there's no metro. There's just buses, but
Uh-huh.
like it's very, very, very different. In Santiago, there's a big metro system, there's buses and metros, it has that hustle and bustle of city of people don't really, they probably say that about all big cities in the world that people aren't friendly and it's not necessarily like that. They're just very concerned with their life and getting to where they need to go. And being from the Midwest in the US, which has a slower, more friendly reputation of people who just live a different lifestyle, that was an additional shock just being in such a big city.
Right. And and culturally, so what was it in the beginning like for you? Because I guess you also dealt with work with a lot of local people. So it were like major cultural differences.
It's a great question. I think like a big cultural difference to really just get like a faraway perspective is I would say like the US is a very much like individualistic culture. Like people are very, which has its pros and cons. And in Chile, it's more of the collectivistic kind of group. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is really attached to like how people relate to other people, whether it be their friends or their family, and kind of moving in groups, as in the US, maybe just the culture and the size, like it's very much normalized that people just completely do their own thing and are just so self-focused. So I think that was like really ingrained in the way that I thought because in Chile people when they do things, they make decisions, they think about other people like all the
Mm-hmm.
time. I think a lot
Okay.
more than
Uh-huh.
in the US. And as opposed to work, I think it's definitely like there's high expectations, but it's also a lot like there's a more relaxed way of kind of relating to each other. It's not as maybe like depending on the business or the kind of environment someone's in, it could be more formal. But in
Mm-hmm.
my case, it was, it's very like friendly and relaxed, but there's still kind
Uh-huh.
of that expectation there that it's professional. It's just,
Okay.
there's a different like cultural way that people interact with each other that
Mm-hmm.
is more nuanced and like you kind of the things you don't really realize right away until you realize like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that or done it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And and then in the beginning also settling in. So you went there with that English school, and did they provide everything, or were you like, here, you're here, but you have to find everything yourself?
Yeah, it was the second one. It was like
Yeah.
that. So that was, yeah, that was an experience of just finding living situation, living with I lived with a like local family for a few months.
Ah, okay.
And that was yeah,
But that's like great, right? Because then you can like really experience like the different culture and different foods and see
yeah,
how like the family functions there.
totally. It was very, very, very different. And it was really great, exactly what you said, to see all of that. But then it was kind of experience with like being a 24-year-old. I didn't
Right.
want to have a curfew. I didn't want to
Right,
not be
right,
able to
right.
hang out with boys at the apartment. Like
Right,
I
right.
was kind of looking for something a little bit more aligned with like my phase of
More
life.
independent, kind of.
Yeah. And I would
Yes.
say that's
Uh-huh.
another cultural difference is in Chile it's more common that like people can live with their parents until they're married. Whereas in the US
Ah,
people usually like could leave home at 18.
right.
So I had like 6 years of independence already, but in Chile they are like 24 is considered very, very, very young. So that
Oh,
was
okay.
another thing. People be like, "Oh, you're such a baby, you're so young," and I was like, "Not to me, not really." So the
Mm-hmm.
difference of age and how like what the expectations are is quite different.
Ah, that is interesting. So they were felt also very protective of you, kind of.
Yeah, and I think that they like, I think because I think it comes a lot to like a lot of people live with their families for longer. So it kind of makes sense how like whenever someone lives on their own or with roommates, there's kind of a lot of like maturing moments and you have to learn
Mm-hmm.
how to do your laundry and cook for yourself. And yeah, just kind of you have to do a lot more on your own. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of most people in Chile at that age either live with their siblings or live with their parents. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's kind of like in my they didn't really it wasn't like I didn't feel like I was like a full functioning adult to them. It was
Right.
kind of like, oh, you're kind of maybe like a teenager still. And I was like,
Right,
not
right, right.
really.
Okay. So when did you then finally move out there?
I moved out a few months later, and that was a fun experience to live with other people my age and live more in a roommate situation, which felt a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just a good match for kind of what I wanted long term. But
Okay.
it was definitely nice to have that experience, like to see a Chilean family and to like have seen that and lived that. It just was a short term thing.
Right. And did you so how did you manage then finding your own place? Was it something like Craigslist, or
Yeah.
how do they do it there?
And that they do have something like that here. And I live with roommates because a friend that I had made, they were looking for another roommate. And so I was like, oh, I want to live there. And then after that experience, it was kind of the Craigslist type of thing, like
Mm-hmm.
going and interviewing and just kind of living with people that you don't know at all. So sometimes that was great. And sometimes, yeah, challenging,
Mm-hmm.
like all roommate stuff.
Yeah. And was it with, did you live with Chileans or did you live with internationals?
One of my roommates was also from the US and one was Chilean. And then the other ones, the one living situation, one was also a girl from England. The other ones were Chilean, Peruvian. Then there was one from Paraguay. So quite like a
Okay, it
balance,
was
I
a
would
great
say.
mix.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yes. So, and in that house, did you speak English?
Yeah, at that point, it took me a while to really get a handle on Spanish because I was teaching English for
Uh-huh.
as my job, and a
Right.
lot of the friends that I made in the beginning were also English kind of people, English speaking people living abroad. So
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to to learn Spanish. So
Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah,
was definitely
yeah.
mostly English in the beginning.
Yes. And then, okay, so how long did it then take you to be more comfortable in Spanish?
I would say that it took me like Well, I would say for the first 8 months, which is how long I worked at the English speaking
Uh-huh.
company, I don't really, I think I understood more than I could speak, but I couldn't really speak
Uh-huh.
that much. And things started to shift when I switched to a Chilean company that was all Spanish and it was a digital marketing company. So it was
Okay.
completely different out of the English speaking kind of context. And so I
Okay.
would say from that point, it was like a
A
year where I
year.
felt more comfortable with Spanish.
Okay. And could you just switch easily from that one company to the other one?
It was you mean like because my visa
Yeah,
or
yeah, exactly.
I don't remember it being a problem because the visa that I had in Chile was a temporary work visa.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't a visa that was like tied to in a job or something
Ah,
like
yeah,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. Oh, okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah. But I think if it would have been a visa that's tied to like your employer, then yeah, that would have been different.
Was it then also really easy for you to make friends?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say that it wasn't necessarily easy. I think that it was kind of like just putting myself out there a lot and
Mm-hmm.
like surrounding myself with people a lot. A lot
Okay.
of the friends I think that I made in the beginning, like for reasons just naturally kind of growing apart, different interests, or a lot of them have moved away already, and it's just
All
become
right.
harder to keep the contact. I think also I'm 32 now, and I was 24 when I arrived, so I very much like went through a lot of the chapters in your 20s, and then just kind of different life experience sometimes, where sometimes people just grow at different paces.
Yeah, yeah,
But
of course.
I think at that time of my life, there was more opportunities to meet people
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people hung out in groups and I was single. And I think that that was an advantage for me to be single because I just threw myself into a bunch of social
Okay,
situations.
sure.
Yeah. And I think at the time it didn't feel like as much of an obstacle that it felt like when I got more later in the experience and realized just with life kind of situations when people started to prioritize their career more and their relationships more. At that time, people really prioritized friendship and meeting up
Mm-hmm.
together. Um, so I think it's felt harder in the second half of living abroad than in the first half.
Okay. Right. And then when you met your now husband, like how did it change?
Yeah, like friendships are just my experience.
Both, like friendships, did you like met a lot of your friends through him?
Yeah,
And also, yeah, and then also you probably experienced the whole Chilean thing a lot closer.
definitely. Yeah, I think definitely that it was a very different experience being single and in a very international community living abroad
Uh-huh.
versus being in a relationship with someone who's native to, Chilean and being surrounded by people who are very Chilean.
Yeah.
So it definitely does have a much different perspective. I think it's more of like it feels less temporary, I think, because like the
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle is more about your relationships and just meeting up with people and kind of the same thing it would be probably anywhere. Then I'm going to travel to this new place all the time. And where have you traveled to? And kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
connecting off of
exactly.
that. I would say that, yeah, like I have met some great people from my husband. I think it's a good mix of like, there's a lot of people who are really close friends now that I have made through him. And then there's other people that have kind of been more of my community, like ex coworkers or just friends that I had
Right.
before. So I do think it did add like a nice mix of more Chilean people than I did have before for sure.
And then, so when you met your husband, that was then a reason for you to stay in Chile? Was it ever like a question of you guys moving to the US?
Definitely, yeah. We know that we'll move to the US or to another country at some point. We know that at some point the Chilean chapter is going to end. And we kind of were on the same page of that from the beginning. My husband studied abroad in New Zealand in high school, so is
Uh-huh.
bilingual and likes traveling and is wants to
Okay.
also live abroad too. So
So
I
was this
think
already like a connection for you two because he could speak English really well when you guys
yes,
met? Yeah.
yeah. When we met, we spoke. I was fluent in Spanish by that point, but
Uh-huh.
it's definitely a really important to have. I think in an intercultural relationship, having a
Yeah, so
language
you can switch sometimes if you have
all
like
the
the urge
time.
of like saying really speaking your mind.
Exactly. Or fighting or
Yeah.
yelling or
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
all
Uh-huh.
the things. I would say, yeah, now it's like very much Spanglish. Like even
Uh-huh.
one thought just switches with both of us because, as you know yourself, knowing multiple languages, sometimes there's just, you feel like there's a better way to say something in that
Yeah,
language and then
exactly.
there's a
Exactly.
better way in
Uh-huh.
that one. Yeah, definitely. And just knowing, I think it's important so that my husband can really know my family and know my friends and to be able to communicate with them is
Mm-hmm.
important. And the same thing for me to know his family and his friends and
Yeah.
yeah, to understand that part more deeper of the other person.
Uh-huh. And sorry, I interrupted you there.
No
So
worries.
we were talking about your Chilean chapter might end and you might go somewhere else.
We definitely will. I guess I could rephrase that. We will go somewhere else. I guess the unknown factor is when. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think before I used to put a lot of pressure on myself, like, I need to know when I'm going to
Right,
move
right.
back
Oh, yes, I know
home.
that.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
move back here. Or if I move back, then it has to be forever. If I move here, and I'm just like, I'm just going to embrace this more like just
Yeah,
living.
exactly.
This is working for us right now. Really happy right now. And I think we'll know once it's time to move on. But
Yeah,
honestly, that could be 2 years, that could be 5 years, that could be 10 years. We don't
I know.
know. Yeah.
But you kind of, it's nice if you can make certain plans, you know? It's like, can I buy like this piece of furniture here? Would it make sense? Or I'm not gonna buy a new couch if we move away in 2 years.
Oh
Or
yeah,
like I
for
gonna look
sure.
for a new job because I wanna whatever do something else, but if we move away in a year, I can stick it out right now.
For sure, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. Like, yeah, and that as it's important. So I think with that in mind, it's probably more likely that it's not like in a year or 2 years, just because we're just, a year goes by quite quickly. We're
It
almost
does,
almost
yes.
through this year. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't see it being in the short term, but I guess we don't have like a clear idea, but I totally get what you're saying. It's important to have an idea approximately, but sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes when you know. And I have seen people who are living abroad really rush the move back to their home country and then
Mm-hmm.
regret it or move someone out. And
Yeah.
so just seeing that from the outside, I'm like, I want to just feel a little bit more at peace with the
Yeah.
chapter ending instead of just rushing it.
Would you guys go back to the US or would you rather move somewhere else?
That's a great question. I think it's really tough because there's always the interest in going somewhere else, like going somewhere in Europe. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the draw to the US is more being closer to friends and family. I would say that's like
Yeah.
the primary reason.
Yes.
But to be honest, like we have a really high quality of life in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things that I've almost been out of the US for 10 years now. So certain unfortunate things about the US, like issue with guns and just certain things that I think I see more now as maybe like a foreigner in the US
Mm-hmm.
instead of I used to just kind of normalize certain
Yeah.
things. And now I'm like, ooh, like it's really interesting having almost like I'm from the US, but I think I've had so much distance. So I see things a
Mm-hmm.
lot differently. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's maybe not so normal in other places in the
Yeah.
world. Or just, I think it could be really, or even tiny things that seem small. Like we don't need a car. We can move, we can walk
That
and we
is
can go on,
nice.
yeah, on the
You
metro.
save so much money on like having no car.
Yeah. And in the US, as you know, most cities are built to need a car. There's not a
Car, I
great
know.
public
Yes.
transit.
No, I wish.
Yeah. So there's things like that that I try to keep in mind because I think that I won't be a big deal, but maybe it will because we're so used to that being like a daily part of our
I
lives.
know.
So yeah, but I'm sure that's what it is like for anyone when they move somewhere new. So it's definitely a high contender, but also my husband has a Spanish nationality because of his
Ah,
grandparents.
okay, okay.
So that could also be a
So this be
possibility.
also an option. Oh, this is nice. You have all the
Yeah.
options.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is really nice. So I feel like Spain and the US are quite different. So that
Yeah.
sometimes we'll have to see.
How was it for you then? Because now you're in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
How was it for you, the change, like Christmas and summer, for example?
That's an amazing question, actually, because my birthday is next week. And
Uh-huh.
I'm always used to
A
having my
summer
birthday
kid.
and a summer kid. Exactly. Exactly. And I think for growing up for the longest time, that was my favorite season was summer. Obviously, being summer when you have the whole summer off is super nice. You don't
Yeah.
have a lot of worries. So I think it's a great question because I think it still feels weird. Um, Especially with Christmas, because in the
Yeah.
US, Christmas is very much like over the top, which can has its pros and cons, but it can be really fun if you just try to
Uh-huh.
have fun with
Yeah.
it. And in Chile, Christmas, I mean, it's warm, it's very hot. So it's like 80s and
Okay.
90s. And it's, yeah, I think yeah, just not having the snow, it's very different. It still doesn't really, so I always forget that Christmas is coming around. It
Okay.
still feels like, oh,
Because
it's
there is
Christmas.
no feeling.
Yeah,
But do you still like, do they decorate and everything?
they do, but like there's no pine trees. There's no like there's no
Right.
natural
Okay.
Christmas
Yeah, I
tree.
mean, of course,
Yeah.
it's like,
So
I don't know.
there's those things. And I just remember like Christmas when I was growing up, like it sounds really corny, but like it was just really much like people, like it was kind of always there. There was always a
Mm-hmm.
Christmas vibe. And there's some things that can be, maybe some people don't like that, but then sometimes it can be kind of like cheerful and like happy and like just cozy. I was also because it's
Right,
cold and the
right.
warm drinks. And
Mm-hmm.
so
But
here
this is all
it's
part of the Christmas package, kind of.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's kind of fun. And in Chile, it's not like that. It's not like as maybe commercial as it is in the US. And I know a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people talk about the negatives of that, but like I think it's actually kind of fun. Like to
Yeah,
just
it is kind of fun. Yeah,
all the
it's true.
movies. Yeah, it definitely has, we can acknowledge the downside. But, and also Christmas here, they celebrate the 24th at night.
Mm-hmm.
And for the 25th, they
Mm-hmm.
don't, it's just kind of like any other day. So that
Okay,
still
okay.
feels really sad to me
Is
because
it is it though like people have to go to work or is it still like a holiday?
Yes, that's a good question. It's still a holiday, but people
Uh-huh.
celebrate Christmas Eve is the
Mm-hmm.
big night, and they, for example, kids look for Santa Claus at like 10 p.m. at night. They
Yeah.
look
Uh-huh.
for, instead of in the US, they open presents on Christmas morning. So
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like there's maybe some things that are like nostalgic that like I internalize, and I'm like, it's so weird to me that they don't, the Christmas day isn't the big thing that you're building up to, that it's just in the nighttime. And then people are like, what are you going to do tomorrow? Oh, I might just hang out, or, and
Yeah.
everything's closed. So it's kind of like, wow, that's lame. For
Yeah,
me,
yeah, yeah.
it
Uh-huh.
feels so lackluster, I guess.
Right, right. I get it. No, we also celebrate Christmas on the 24th, like
Ah,
Christmas
okay.
Eve, and all the gifts and everything. Everything's happening on the 24th, not at 10, but like at in the
In the
evenings.
nighttime, yeah.
And but we have the 25th and the 26th is still like Christmas holidays, and you meet family. You know, you meet your extended family, your aunts and uncles and cousins.
That's different. That's
Yeah.
great because it's still like extended. It's not just it kind of reminds me of like the Sunday after you went out for a really late Saturday night when you're like, I might just
Right,
order a
right.
pizza and sit on the couch. It's kind of how it is, like
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
having a lot of plans. So it can feel, it's just very different, I think, to the way that it is in the US. But yeah, I totally, there's actually, I realized a lot of the world celebrates the 24th. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
just in, actually it's all of South America. Sounds like that was in Germany. So like that's, it's very, I see now that it's very common in a lot of places. I think, yeah, that's just a difference in the US that people do things on the 24th, but the big thing is usually the 25th.
Yeah. And do you have a favorite Chilean holiday?
That's a good question. Well, there, I'm really grateful they have so many. We have a lot of holidays here. I do like their Independence Day, which
Mm-hmm.
is September 18th and 19th, I think.
Uh-huh.
So in Chile, they don't celebrate Carnival like in Brazil and in Argentina
Okay.
and
Mm-hmm.
other countries in Latin America. So like their Independence Day is like their carnival. Like they
Okay.
really get really spirited. They drink all of their like national drinks and have their national foods, and they have these thing called fondas, which are kind of just like county fairs where you go and
Mm-hmm.
there's just music and dancing and just some,
Okay.
it's just like a really, I don't know, it's nice to just be around friends and you dance the national dance. um
Okay.
yeah, it's nice.
And is it all like happening outside on the streets?
It's happening at people's homes, and
Uh-huh.
the fondas affairs are usually like in a big park or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, that sounds fun.
it is fun,
And
yeah.
it's in springtime then?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
usually kind of cold because it's, the
still.
first month of spring is like a mix between winter and
Yeah,
spring.
yeah, still
Yeah.
cold. Uh-huh. But that sounds fun. Now you've been there so long. What is there that you really appreciate?
I think for one, being from somewhere that's so cold for so long, it's really nice just to have the four seasons here.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, so the winter is not that long because you're up high in the mountains, aren't you? Isn't it pretty high?
I don't think the altitude is that high, but you are right that the it is surrounded by the Andes Mountains, so we
Mm-hmm.
are in this valley, and the hiking, that's also something I appreciate, is
Uh-huh.
that in Santiago, you can go on a hike by getting there in an Uber, you can take the metro and then take a
Oh,
bus.
nice.
It's
Uh-huh.
very accessible to go on hikes.
Uh-huh.
I love that because where I'm from is very flat. So just having
Of course, yeah.
the mountains is, I think for people who are
It's
used
nice.
to that, yeah, it's kind
Oh,
of
you
like
know what? It's so
whatever.
funny every time. So, because in Austin, well, there's some hills, but
Yeah.
in general, it's pretty flat, right? So
Yeah.
every time I see the mountain somewhere, I'm like, oh, this is so nice. It feels just so good just to have something in your horizon.
It is.
It
It
feels
is.
so
It I
nice.
feel like people, I think it's like nature, just like being, I do really appreciate that Chile for any outdoor activity is like a paradise. It's so
Okay.
beautiful. I appreciate a lot about Chile, like as well as like it has every single kind of environment. There's a desert, there's volcanoes, there's lakes,
Uh-huh.
there's glaciers,
So
there's
anything you want, and you have the coast as
the
well.
coast. The coast is just an hour away,
Is
so
it cold though, the water?
it is cold. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very
So
cold.
you don't
That
go into the water really.
I don't. Chileans do. I think because they're just so used to it.
Uh-huh.
I don't. It's freezing. It's
Yeah.
very
I would
cold.
not go either. Oh God, no.
No, I'm more of like a warm ocean type of person, but it's very beautiful. I think when my brother had lived in Portland, Oregon for a while, we went
Uh-huh.
to
Oh, it's
visit
also
different,
coast.
yeah, beaches there and different places in Washington. And those beaches really reminded me a lot of Chile, like
Okay.
very rocky, very beautiful, but
Mm-hmm.
cold. It's not like the
Yes.
Caribbean, you know?
No, no, no. Of course not. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, you have four seasons, of course. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But yeah, I really appreciate that. I also appreciate, I think that people compared to the US, maybe Chileans would think differently, but they are a little bit more laid back than I would say
Mm-hmm.
is so in the US. It is still, for all of the places in Latin America, probably the most like Americanized. So they
Okay.
do have a lot of influences from the US.
Like
But
what?
well, one, I would say gastronomy, like their food, like there's just compared to my husband and I were in Buenos Aires in Argentina in November, and I thought it was so cool that like I didn't see a lot of Starbucks. I didn't see a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
and in Santiago there's a Starbucks on every corner and they're always
Aha,
full.
okay.
And there was like one Starbucks in Buenos Aires and it was empty and everyone was at the local places. And it was just
Nice.
like more of going to local places and just like more of a felt like more of a pride there. And here it's like
Right.
there's a lot of
Uh-huh.
chains from the US and
Ah,
it's not
that's what you
bad.
mean. Okay.
Yeah. And I would say that I think I don't know too much about this, but like politically wise as well, like the US has always had like a very strong like hand in Chile and has had
Ah, I didn't know this.
yeah, and have had they've always had a good commercial relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of influence in just from food to culture to I think a lot of sometimes the not so great things about the US, you know, the
Okay.
overworking kind of stuff, being really image focused
Yes,
stuff.
I
So
was
yeah.
just wondering, like, if the work environment is different.
I think it's definitely different because it's still Chile and it's still there's a different culture and like when you, for example, start a meeting in Chile, like the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes are usually talking about like, hey, how's your partner doing? How's your friend doing? What's up?
Uh-huh.
And they really like it's like genuine, like, okay, we're gonna have this conversation
Right,
and then
right.
we're gonna get to that. In the US, I think it's more like, okay, let's get to business, like
Okay,
straight
right, okay.
to it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is still, it depends really where a person works because I think someone working for a huge multinational corporation versus someone working for a small business,
Mm-hmm.
it could be very different. I've never worked for a huge multinational, but for my friends who have Chilean and international, yeah, it's quite intense. Like it's very fast paced, a lot's expected out of you. It sounds
Uh-huh.
really similar to the US where you might
I
be
see.
overworked a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what you do now?
Well, now I am actually a life coach for expats and for people living
Uh-huh.
abroad. So just supporting them and helping them through this big life transition and with their community, with their career, with their changing relationships. So yeah, that's what I do now.
do you work with people mainly in Chile or everywhere?
Everywhere. Yeah, Chile, everywhere. Really, the coaching that I do is in English. So as long as the person can do coaching in English, that's
Mm-hmm.
really the only requirement. But yeah, Chile, other places.
And what would you say do your clients struggle most with?
I think a big one is around like the social part, the social
Uh-huh.
thing, as well as dealing with these kind of unexpected, sometimes like identity changes, I guess, and kind of these unexpected challenges of when you live in another country, you learn and you grow a lot, you're exposed to different things and maybe friends and family back home. So it kind of shifts a lot of things from like the way you see yourself, the way you relate to your home country, belonging abroad, and then not feeling like you really belong anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that it can be kind of to be like the outlier sometimes can have its pros and cons. And there's a lot of personal change and growth that is great and people want that. But then it's really different to actually go through it and feel like,
Yes,
oh, this is actually really hard and I feel really
this is how it
alone in
feels.
this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, tell me real quick, how do people find you?
Sure. Yeah. My Instagram is coach with MM and that's all lowercase. And on TikTok as well, it's coach with MM.
Okay, and I make sure that we will put this info in the show notes so people can just click on it and then they will find you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Of course. And what is, okay, so going back to Chile,
Sure.
was there any food there that you don't like?
Ooh, that's a great question.
But
My
then also,
husband is
and
going to
then
listen to this.
also, and then also, like, if there's what's your favorite Chilean food?
Okay, that's you're so kind to include
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that.
Not just all the negative. Let's do some positive
Okay, my
too.
favorite, I love that the seafood because right, fish and seafood. Chileans say that okay, there's a Chilean ceviche, but I think of ceviche as more Peruvian. But
Uh-huh.
bueno, it's they both cultures have it, and they have different types of like seafood and different types of like I like the seafood things just because being from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, there's no ocean, so
Right, right.
that was very exotic to like we did never really eat seafood because it's so
Mm-hmm.
expensive. And I would say something that I'm not a big fan of. I might get canceled by some Chileans for this, but Chileans love hot dogs
Okay.
and they call them completos. Like that's what
Uh-huh.
their hot dog is
With
with
everything?
avocado and
Uh-huh.
mayonnaise and ketchup, mustard, and sauerkraut.
Okay.
I just don't see the big deal about hot dogs.
Uh-huh. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a hot dog.
I actually am more used to bratwurst, the German bratwurst,
Uh-huh.
just because in Milwaukee that's more of like a barbecue thing or at a baseball game with having like
Right.
if I'm gonna choose, I would rather have like a better sausage than
Right,
hot
right.
dog. But yeah, Chileans are they love that. And I also really love spicy food, like flavorful food, lots of condiments, and they don't do a lot of, there's no
Uh-huh.
spicy.
Okay. It's more
So
plain.
yeah, they do more, yeah. So I think that's a big difference. Like it's just not the food that I grew up around,
Right, right.
but it's not bad. It's just I have a different taste, I guess.
Okay, I see. But it's not for you like you go to a restaurant and then it's like, oh no, I don't like any of that.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It could be worse. It's like, oh, I get something and it might be like meat and potatoes or like chicken and rice or it's okay. I love Mexican food. I love Indian food. I love food that has a lot more. I love Peruvian food too, like that usually has lots of
That's
like
lots
spices
more
and
spices, more
right. Yeah.
flavor.
So it is very different, but it's not inedible. It's not bad.
Okay, it's not an edible. Okay. Well, you get the curve there.
Yeah.
And does your family visit you a lot?
They don't visit a lot. I will celebrate my 2-year wedding anniversary in November this year, and the
Mm-hmm.
last time they came was for our wedding, which was
Okay.
really fun. My mom has came. I think she's come twice.
Mm-hmm.
I've mostly gone there than them
Okay.
coming here, but it was super. It was so fun having them here for our wedding because some of my cousins were here, some of my friends were here, and it was really fun just being able to go to vineyards together and go on a city
Right.
tour and go to the coast and just kind of for them to meet my friends here and my husband and his friends and his family because I had just for them to be able to see and know kind of all of my life here.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's not often, I think, just because Chile is unfortunately quite an expensive country for Latin America, and it's not the
Okay.
compared to other countries, like neighboring countries, it's not as affordable to get
Mm-hmm.
to or to travel around. So
Right. And it's a long flight
it's a
too.
very long flight. Yeah, the flight's expensive, and once you get to Santiago, it's you're already so far. It's kind of sad if you don't get to see something else
I know
besides.
you just don't go for like a week. You want to take your time.
Exactly. And it's so far. So in the US, depending on someone's job, some people have more vacation days, some people don't.
Right. That's a
So
problem, I
actually,
think. Yeah.
yeah, this year we're going to be meeting in Medellin, Colombia for Christmas and New
Oh,
Year's with
nice.
my
Yes.
husband and my family. So we're trying to start like,
To meet in the middle. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great.
let's go visit a new place together.
Yes, because I saw lately, not lately, I saw a few weeks ago from the US, the flights to Colombia, they were so cheap. I was
They
really
are.
surprised that
Yeah.
it was like $350,
Yep.
which is like, what?
They are
It's
really
like
cheap.
crazy cheap for like an international flight, even to another continent. Yes.
It is, and I wonder too. I bet it's better just because you're so far south, so it's probably like
Mm,
really nice. My sister lives in Atlanta. My sister and brother live in Atlanta, and there it's really close
yeah,
for them too. And you probably just jump over to Dallas, and you have the flights that are like out of
probably. I mean, I
Dallas.
wouldn't
Yeah,
even, I don't remember how you got there, but I was just surprised how inexpensive it is in
it's
comparison to
very
other
affordable.
international flights. And also, so we have friends who are from Ecuador. Okay, it's right
Hmm.
next to Colombia. And
Hmm.
when they told me like their flight is only hours, I was like, wait, I thought it's like so far away, but like from here, you just have this weird angle and it's not far.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's something I think because the continent is, long and depending on what country it is in the continent, it could be a lot further. For me too, it's easy. I forgot too. And I didn't think of, oh, Colombia is like affordable because it's close by. It's not a long flight for them at all. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not that it's like the same distance for us to get there than for them to
Uh-huh.
get there.
Okay.
So,
Which is crazy, kind of, right? Because
yeah,
Mexico is also so big,
true.
but
Very
it's
true.
maybe just the angle. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to check it out on the map.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I have never been to Medellin before, but I have been to Cartagena and Santa Marta and like more of the Caribbean kind of beachy part
Mm-hmm.
of Colombia. And it's a really beautiful country, and the people are just so warm and kind, and just a really special place. So it is an affordable, nice destination. So I would
Yeah,
definitely
yeah, yeah.
recommend it.
Yes, yes. It's a good place to meet in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess I got all my questions.
Awesome.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks for
It
telling
was
me
fun.
everything about your life in Santiago.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, that was my episode with Mary Martha in Chile. And if you are an expat and you are interested in some coaching, then please reach out to her. You will find her info in the show notes. Coach with MM. And if you also want to reach out to me, please do so. All the info is in the show notes as well. But I guess the best way to get to me is worldscollide123pod@gmail.com to send me an email to this address that I just said. And yeah, that was it. And then I hope you tune in again next week for a new episode of Worlds Collide. Until then, bye.